Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I'm lucky enough to fill in for Tucker this evening. Now, Tucker should be off enjoying a pre-planned vacation right now, but instead, he'll be joining us in just a few moments to discuss the disgusting display that occurred outside his house last night. You got a mob of Antifa protesters. How do you know? They spray painted it on his driveway, calling themselves Smash Racism DC. They appeared outside his house in Washington. These people banged on Tucker's door. They vandalized his driveway. They spray painted that symbol. They were chanting, "We know where you sleep at night." And they threatened to come back with pipe bombs. Isn't this great? We're not going to show you the video, but just listen to their chants.
You're outside your home, and we want you to know we know where you sleep at night.
Mailbox.
We know where you sleep at night.
We know where you sleep at night.
Racist scumbags, leave town. Racist scumbags, leave town. Racist scumbags, leave town.
You believe this? Now, Tucker's wife was at home at the time, while Tucker will tell you himself what happened when she heard the banging on the door and where she went. Meanwhile, the D.C. Police Department says they are investigating the entire incident as, get this, a hate crime. And that's basically a first. I know myself how terrible things like this are. I've been harassed by thugs like this before. It followed me a couple of weeks ago for about a half hour with a couple of cameras, tried to incite a subway car full of people to attack me because I work at Fox. Fox News CEO Suzanne Scott and President Jay Wallace took action. They issued this statement a short time ago. It reads, quote, "The incident that took place at Tucker's home last night was reprehensible. The violent threats and intimidation tactics towards him and his wife are completely unacceptable. We as a nation have become far too intolerant of different points of views. Recent events across our country clearly highlight the need for a more civil, respectful, and inclusive national conversation. Those of us in the media and in politics bear a special obligation to all Americans to find some common ground," unquote. Seems like a statement everybody should agree with, right? But not everyone does. Get this. Vox's Matt Yglesias, I think that's how you say his name, whose Twitter profile boasts of his, quote, "flexible morals," tweeted this: "I honestly cannot empathize with Tucker Carlson's wife at all. I agree that protesting at her house was tactically unwise and shouldn't be done, but I am utterly unable to identify with her plight at any level." Tactically unwise. Still, we've been touched by the outpouring of support for Tucker Carlson from other media personalities you might remember. CNN's Brian Stelter, a regular critic of the show, tweeted this out: "Inexcusable. Whether you love or hate Tucker Carlson, we should be able to see this behavior as wrong." His colleague, Chris Cuomo, responded to that quote: "Wrong? If they did what is reported, it is criminal." Former Fox and NBC host Megyn Kelly was one of the first to defend Tucker, tweeting this out: "This has to stop. Who are we? What are we becoming? Tucker Carlson is tough and can handle a lot, but he does not deserve this. His family does not deserve this. It is stomach-churning," close quote. Another show of support came from a Late Show host, Stephen Colbert. Even he tweeted this out: "Fighting Tucker Carlson's ideas is an American right. Targeting his home, terrorizing his family, is an act of monstrous cowardice. Obviously, don't do this, but also take no pleasure in it happening. Feeding monsters just makes more monsters." And there are many, many more statements like this. It's an outpouring that came in today. All to respond to it and taking it all in firsthand is Tucker Carlson, who is on a previously planned vacation and joins us via the telephone. Tucker, that's the response. You're taping your show just before you go on the air. They're outside your house. What have the last 24 hours been like for you?
Well, it's actually been really nice and affirming. I mean, so for every masked lunatic in front of my house, there have been, 100 people, some of whom I don't agree with politically, calling or sending texts of support and kindness. And it's just a reminder of what a really nice country it is. And if you work in our businesses, you can lose sight of that because you see the lunatics. But, most people are not lunatics. Most people are humane and decent and kind, and it's just been a great reminder of that and really a wonderful experience. But what's it like to find out that your wife is hiding in the pantry because people are threatening her? I mean, it's upsetting. And I guess I would say this. I mean, I've characterized the Antifa people and people like them as protesters, but they're not. I mean, they weren't protesting anything. The irony is that, this is the one show that regularly invites people like that on to say what they think. And if you have a point of view that we disagree with, I'll debate you, but I still want to hear it because I think people should hear it. And so, but they weren't trying to change my mind or advocate for a position. They were threatening my family to get me to stop talking. And obviously I'm not going to because it's my job to talk, and I have the support of Fox News, and I'm grateful for that. But then you think of all the people, most people in this country who don't have that lucky combination of circumstances, and they really feel like they have to shut up, that they can't say what they think because they'll be punished. I mean, this has a chilling effect on people's ability to speak and to think freely. That's the point. It's totalitarian in its intent, and we should fight it.
So there's a couple of things going on. You have your career, you have your opinions. Are you going to change? The answer is absolutely no. And this might be, I guess, retro or sexist to say this, but as the head of your household in many respects, traditionally, don't you feel a responsibility to protect those who live with you, like your wife, like your family? What is it like? What did she do as they were banging on your door, spray painting your driveway, and shouting outside your house? And this is more than a dozen people in black outfits. Where was she?
She was in the kitchen, and let me say, you know, if we find ourselves in a country where men aren't allowed to say they want to protect their wives, you know, I don't want to live in that country. That's totally sick and unnatural. So, of course, I feel that obligation. It's my deepest obligation, and I feel it. So I got a bunch of texts from people, my neighbors, saying something terrible is going on at your house. And by the time I called, my wife had the police and my brother there. My brother, I have a very large brother who lives a couple blocks away, thank heaven, and we're close, so he was there immediately. But so she's standing in the kitchen waiting to go out to dinner, and people start pounding and on the door, really hitting the door hard and screaming and threatening, and you know, she thought it was a home invasion. I mean, the truth is, my wife, even though she's married to me, is not very political and not. I mean, we live in Washington, which is. You know, we raised our 4 children in Washington. It's not, believe it or not, a very political environment. People don't talk about politics at dinner. There's kind of a gentleman's agreement to be nonpartisan, and so she's not engaged in this stuff. I'm not sure she knew who Antifa was. She didn't do anything wrong. Why are they screaming at her? I mean, the whole thing was completely grotesque. And the effect is to make it, you know, impossible to, like, open your mail. I mean, one thing they did, I think the worst thing that they did, was they put my home address on the internet, and they put a poster right in front of my house with my home address on it, and they filmed it, they taped it, and they put the tape on the internet. So, you know, I can't have my kids stay home alone now. I'm a normal person. I live in a normal neighborhood. I'm not a talk show host who want to get off the air. I'm a father. I don't want to have those battles in my personal life. I don't think most people do, and now they've brought it right to my house. And I don't want to whine. I'm not a victim. I'm a happy person, but you know, you can see why I wouldn't like that and why I'd feel threatened by it, and why I think that this is a threat to free expression to all of us, and I mean that.
I agree, and also we should, according to the story, the reports, your brother's address is up there too, right?
Oh, they put my brother's address up. They put my college roommate's address up, my best friend who lives down the street from me, who I started the Daily Caller with, who, you know, like my brother, has nothing to do with any of this. And they put both of their home addresses up. My college roommate was on a trip. You know, his wife is home with their little kids, and he's got to get the police over there. My brother has a family, too. I mean, the whole thing is completely crazy. And I should say, just for the record, that I would guess that the overwhelming majority of my neighbors are Democrats, probably don't agree with a single thing I think, but all of them were appalled by this. I mean, we lose sight again of the fact that the country is overwhelmingly normal people who don't think that this is acceptable. And our conversation publicly has been hijacked by extremists like this, and I worry that if we don't stand up to them and say, I'm sorry, this is not allowed. You can't threaten people into silence. The rest of us are very passive in the face of this. Like, I think we know who these people are. In fact, I think one of the people screaming at my wife last night has been a guest on our show. So these are semi-public people, yes. And I can't prove that. We're going to find out. But I'm thinking to myself, two things. If you have something to say, you're always welcome to come back on and say it. Again, he doesn't want to say it. He doesn't want to convince you. He wants to scare you into shutting up. But second, why are the rest of us sitting back and allowing speech to be squelched like this. I mean, nobody is for this, really, other than a tiny minority of people, and yet they have control. How did we get here?
Because they got away with it. And I'm going to add this, Tucker. So you hear Antifa, you know, we cover this every single day. You saw the bike racks being thrown. You saw the bricks being put through Starbucks windows. These people, they yell, they scream, and they're violent. So that's got to really weigh in your mind. You know, we've seen them in action before.
Well, they're absolutely violent. I mean, you know, I don't want to pretend to be the tough guy. I'm not a tough guy, but I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and I'm not personally, I don't feel threatened physically, but, you know, I have 5 other people in my house,
yep.
And maybe they do. And that's the point. So if I'm walking down the street and someone comes up and says, you know, I violently disagree with you, okay, you know, let me hear about it. But to do this is a form of intimidation. So right. Why are we describing it as a protest? It's a protest in the sense that when the mafia tells a store owner, you know, I'd hate to have this place destroyed. That's not a protest. It's a threat.
Exactly.
And that's what this is.
Hey, Tucker, you're supposed to be on vacation. I appreciate you joining us. If anybody wants to know if Tucker's going to be intimidated, watch his A block. That's the beginning of the show when he comes back. I have a hunch you're not going to be pulling back. Tucker Carlson, thanks so much.
Thank you, Brian, for capably filling in. I appreciate it.
Okay, Tucker Carlson, thanks. Please go back to your vacation, wherever it might be. Meanwhile, 11 minutes now after the hour, Victor Davis Hanson, one of the deepest thinkers, respected thinkers out there. He's a senior fellow at the Hoover Institute, and he joins us right now. Victor, you heard all that. We want to talk about returning to civility. How do we first stop this now?
Well, I think we have to, Tucker referred to they, and he had to because he didn't know who they were, but they're a John Smith or a Jane Jones. I mean, they're actual individuals, and we've lost all sense of deterrence. What he described was not a protest. These were criminal acts. And then trespassing, disturbing the peace, or threats of physical violence, they all have penalties. Just as you disrupt a lecture at a university campus or you file a false accusation of Brett Kavanaugh to a federal investigator, but these are not prosecuted. And we have this image that these guys that are doing these things are the desperate of society. In fact, many of them are the upper middle class, and they're vested in their careers, and the last thing they want is an arrest record. And all we would have to do is have brave district attorneys find the individuals and then prosecute them, and that would set an example. And then we need also the carrot, Brian, of civic discourse. I mean, I'm not a Pollyanna. I believe in the First Amendment, of course. We have to have free expression. We've had speech. You know, Ronald Reagan said, let's have a bloodbath once. FDR said, let's not bring Nazism and elect Tom Dewey president. So we've had that rough talk.
Right.
But we need sort of a Hippocratic oath that we don't say what we're otherwise legally entitled to say. Maybe we could just say, I pledge as a public intellectual or celebrity or a politician that I won't release the private information about my opponent. I will not evoke the word Nazism or Adolf Hitler to demonize an opponent. I won't use scatology or profanity when I'm talking in the public sphere. I won't use physical violence, or I won't touch somebody, and have a whole list of things that we pledge that we won't do, even though they may be not always illegal, but they're certainly savage and improper, and they lead to this dissension into savagery.
Victor, you didn't just wing that. You actually wrote that. You have specific tenets on what to follow, and you knocked it down to the basics, and some of which you just mentioned. I'd like to add to this. We're going to talk about it later in the show, but also the way the press was acting with the president a day ago. That fills in all this. That fits in this box as well. You believe we've got to fundamentally bring civics back to school. Secretary of Education DeVos can try to make that happen. Why don't we do it?
I think we need. We don't trust the masters of the universe at Facebook or Twitter to censor our speech, but we as a nation have to get together and say, you know what, we need formal education in civics, and that can be taught at the high school or the college, and we need a new example of what ethics are. Ethics are not just cosmic ideologies. It's treating people the way you want to be treated. Maybe we should just have a Hippocratic idea of do no harm, if nothing else, to somebody when you engage them in discourse. And we've had people in the media that have said terrible things on the air and et cetera. We can stop it with shame and social pressure, I think.
Yeah, we used to get that in the household, but it's not happening now, so we got to stop it elsewhere. Victor Davis Hanson, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Fox News alert now, 12 people are dead after a gunman opens up fire at a California bar packed with college students. A sheriff's deputy was killed trying to save others' lives. Trace Gallagher joins us now with more on the Thousand Oaks mass shooting. This is what we covered all morning long on Fox and Friends, Trace, and it's just getting worse.
Yeah, Brian, by all accounts, Ian David Long methodically attacked the Borderline bar, shooting a security guard outside, then walking inside and shooting other security teams before turning the Glock 45 caliber handgun toward those in the bar area and dance floor. Witnesses say it appeared he knew exactly what he was doing, and now we know why. Ian David Long was reportedly a regular at Borderline. A series of unnamed friends say they often went with him to the bar to have drinks and listen to music, saying it was a place that he appeared to be happy, and yet in less than a minute, he turned a dance hall into a hellhole. Here's video posted on Instagram where you can hear shots fired. Watch this. Yeah. Ventura County Sheriff's Deputy Sergeant Ron Hellis was the first officer in the bar. He exchanged gunfire with the suspect but was hit several times and died a short time later. Police say the shooter had an extended magazine, increasing the number of rounds the gun could fire, but witnesses also say he reloaded, giving some people time to exit and scramble for the exits. It also appears the shooter, a former Marine, may have battled with PTSD, Brian, and sadly, we have learned that former Fox News correspondent Adam Housley's 18-year-old niece, Elena, was among the victims. Brian.
Brother's daughter. Unbelievable. Trace Gallagher, thanks so much.
Yeah. Sure.
All right, meanwhile, Republicans appeared to triumph in Florida's Senate race and the governor's race. Now Marco Rubio says Democrats are using underhanded tactics to try and steal the seat and the governor's seat. They'll be here next. The midterms are over, or are they over? In the last two Senate races we thought were going to the GOP, they seemed to win on election night. I'm talking about Florida, I'm talking about Arizona. Thousands of uncounted ballots keep popping up, though, mostly in the Democratic-leaning areas. What is going on here, and why are these elections still up in the air? Senator Marco Rubio's had it. He's tweeted about it, saying this: Democrat lawyers are descending on Florida. They've been very clear they aren't there to make sure that every vote is counted. They are here to change the results of the election, and Broward County is where they plan to do it. Senator Marco Rubio joins us right now. Senator, what makes you think that?
Their words. They held a press conference and said that we're not here to just have a recount, we're here to win. And look, we have procedures in the law for close elections and recounts. I have no problem with any of that. I have no problem with anyone availing themselves of what the law allows them to do. Here's my problem. My problem is this is focused on two counties, and in particular one county. So let me use an example. Bay County, Florida, where Panama City is, was hit by a Category 4 hurricane about 4 weeks to the day of this election. They were without power. You guys covered all this. They did all their ballots at a 52% return rate, 52% turnout despite the hurricane. They did all their ballots, submitted them on time. They were done basically on election night early the following morning, very early. Broward County, 48 hours later, is still counting. And they didn't have a Category 4 hurricane, and it's not the first time that they do this. Problem number one. Problem number two is we don't know how many votes they have, and neither do they. Either they don't know or they won't tell anybody how many ballots are left to count, and so forth. And so it's concerning when you go to sleep at 3 a.m. on Wednesday morning after the election, and, for example, Rick Scott is up by 60,000 votes, 54,000 votes, whatever it was. Today is at 17,000. And the only counties that are still reporting are Palm Beach and Broward,
right?
Who have a history, by the way, on these things. Broward County lost a lawsuit to the Republican Party a while back because they were opening up absentee ballots and beginning to count them before they were supposed to. Okay, Broward County in August of this year, in Broward County, right, mysteriously, or I should just say, let me not use that term, 5,000 mail ballots appeared all of a sudden at 7 p.m. on Tuesday night of the election. Then it actually grew to 9,000. When they were done counting those, a school board race that involved Ryan Petty, one of the Parkland fathers that was challenging a school board member, suddenly the incumbent was able to barely, but she did, avoid a runoff. A judge race flipped at a 400-vote margin after these 9,000 votes appeared. So this is a pattern of, at a minimum, incompetence, and it's embarrassing to the state. Voters deserve better. This is not even a partisan thing. This is a county that apparently cannot count votes as well as a county that just got wiped out by a hurricane.
No matter what happens, you have a sitting governor up for this election, and Marco Rubio, you've been there. You should straighten this out. Brenda Snipes illegally destroyed ballots in 2016. She's still in charge. Now they can't count the ballots. They're supposed to have it up 30 minutes after elections closes. It's still not done. So I just talked to Governor Scott's office. He has a presser tonight, and he says they understand there's got to be a recount, an automatic recount, first by machine. If it's still close, then by hand. Now we understand that Andrew Gillum says it looks like he is going to retract his concession, and he's going to look for a recount there as the vote's beginning to close as well.
Yeah, look, the recount is fine. The law provides for that. In the case of the governor's race and Gillum and DeSantis, they're going to take the ballots and feed them back in the machine and make sure the machine is accurately reflecting them. In the case of the Senate campaign, they're going to manually recount these ballots. And what that means is they're only going to manually recount undervotes and overvotes, meaning ballots that voted for more than one candidate or ballots that did not vote for any candidate. And they're going to look at it and see, was there a marking that showed a voter's intent? Now, it has to be consistent throughout the ballot. So if you put an X in the circle, you got to have put an X in all the circles. You can't just do it for one race. But that's where the lawyers get involved. That's where the fights begin to happen. And that's where we have seen races in the past suddenly turn. My problem is, if this was something we were seeing in multiple counties, it's in one county, and it happens to be a very Democratic county. Look, people have a right to be concerned about it.
Senator, real quick, Mark Elias is coming in. He's a Clinton attorney, and guess what? Works for Perkins Coie. And guess what? They hired Fusion GPS, who hired Christopher Steele. We're back in the dossier conversation. Mark Elias is back in our lives as a country. The Clinton lawyers are here, and they're going to start putting a lawsuit together that the Senate vote, the punch for the Senate, was way on the bottom of the ballot, separate, making it hard for people to vote. So they're going to challenge this legally, along with the recounts, along with the ballots. We might have another mess in Florida, but you're at least standing up ahead of time instead of talking about it in the aftermath. Crazy. Senator Marco Rubio, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Crazy, right? Meanwhile, Democrats revealed their first priority, since they now have the majority in the House coming up in January. Incoming House Intel Chair Adam Schiff signaled his intent to expand the Russian probe. Isn't that great? And Congressman Richard Neal said this.
Yeah, I think we will, yes. But I hope that the president would do this on his own, largely because every president since Gerald R. Ford has voluntarily done this.
Tax returns. Molly Hemingway, the Federalist, overheard something on the Acela train yesterday. Molly, you can add to this story. What did you hear from Jerry Nadler? Nice to see you.
Great seeing you. Yes, I was up in New York. I saw you when we were up there doing election coverage, took the train down and happened to sit right next to Jerry Nadler, the powerful incoming chair of the House Judiciary Committee. Now, we're starting to hear people say, yep, we're going to do a lot of investigations. But when the midterm elections were happening, they said they weren't concerned about impeaching President Trump or going after Kavanaugh. Well, Jerry Nadler, in various phone calls that he took and had while we were on the phone or while we were on the train, said that, in fact, one of the things that the Judiciary Committee plans to do is, in fact, go after Justice Kavanaugh through one of a couple of different means, either by going after the FBI for doing a fraudulent investigation, in his view, and relitigating all of that in front of the House Judiciary Committee. And they discussed, the promise and peril of what it would be like to impeach Justice Kavanaugh. And they also said they're all in on the Russia investigation. There's sort of a broad, coordinated effort across multiple committees to, in fact, do the thing that they told voters they weren't going to do during the 2018 midterms.
So, Molly, get this. You leave the New York, heading to D.C., and Jerry Nadler does not know who you are. He just happens to be talking loud on the phone, revealing his strategy for his entire party, which affects the country. I'm so glad he's got his hands on the wheel. Let's add to this. He also said, oops, we have a lot of people who got elected who happen to be moderate that might not be that allied with us, correct?
Well, he was more worried actually about what was happening to the Democratic Party's coalition. He feels they've lost working class voters, that those people are now going to Republicans, that they can no longer call themselves the party of the working class, because the new voters that they're getting are these sort of never Trump style elite Republicans who he thinks hurt the overall brand of the Democratic Party. And he was also worried that the thriving economy could pose problems, because if anything bad happens to it, he's worried that Democrats will be blamed for it.
Wow, so you don't need to get that glass and put it to the wall to find out what he's saying. You just have to hop on the train, and he's yelling it. Molly Hemingway, thanks so much. You're always a reporter, always delivering. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Meanwhile, we have transgenders and trans radicalism, so why not trans ageism? Mark Stein with quite a bizarre story, and it's out of the Netherlands, but it's on this planet, so we're covering it. All right, transgenderism is increasingly a part of American life. Now, a man wants to be trans-aged. I'm talking about Emil Ratelband. He's asking a Dutch court to legally change his age from 69 to 49.
I feel I suffer under my age. When I'm really 49 again, I will have a baby again. I will buy a new car again. If I have that age again, I have hope again. I'm new again. And the whole future is there for me again.
Ratelband also says that lowering his age would also let him do better at the job and dating markets. Sounds like a good deal. Author and columnist Mark Stein wants to weigh in here. Mark, why not? If we don't have to declare a gender, why declare an age?
No, we've basically repealed the facts of life so that on your birth certificate you can leave the sex blank as they did with a baby in British Columbia, because its mother is a non-binary transgender who wants the baby to make up its own mind about what sex it is. You can change the parent. A court in California put two fathers down on the birth certificate because they didn't want to figure out which one of them was actually genetically. We've repealed the facts of life. So why not repeal age?
He says that he'll give up his pension. He's going to go all the way. He says, I'll give up my pension. I'll get a different car for a 49-year-old instead of a 69-year-old. So he wants to stay with this.
Yeah, well, that's actually where you tie together the social liberalism and the fiscal conservatism, as moderate Republican governors always say, because if he's offering to defer his pension for 20 years, if everybody was to demand that they had 20 years knocked off their life, we could save Social Security just like that. The pension crisis of the Western world, the public pensions crisis, would suddenly go away. So in that sense, if 50 is the new 30, as they say in the fashion magazines, let's make it literal and all defer our pensions for 20 years.
So, Mark, what's my takeaway? I have to run, but I want to feel better about myself after this segment because I've never been more confused. What's my takeaway?
Well, we all have the right to self-identify, Brian. I identify as Brian Kilmeade, but for some reason it keeps getting me worse tables in restaurants.
That's
so
exactly
there's a positive way to look at these things.
Right. You don't want to be too young and have to show ID and not be able to get into bars, because that's where Mark Stein is the happiest. Mark Stein, thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, Brian.
The world's a better place with you here. Meanwhile, now this. CNN's Jim Acosta has been banned from the White House. How will he get the attention he craves now, I ask myself, and then you ask you. That story's next.